Hello, my name is Margaret Cook and I'm a lay preacher and worship at Christ Church, Ilkley. And today we're going to bring you part of the service, reading and reflection from Matthew's Gospel. We have been thinking through St. Matthew's Gospel, and we're now thinking about the parable of the three servants. Matthew 25, 14 to 30. And the theme we've headed, expectations, risks, and faithfulness. So with that, I'll hand over to David Goldsborough, who will read the passage first.
Thank you, Margaret. The parable of the three servants. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like this. Once there was a man who was about to leave home on a trip. He called his servants and put them in charge of his property. He gave to each one according to his ability. To one he gave 5,000 gold coins, to another he gave 2,000, and to another he gave 1,000. Then he left on his trip. The servant who had received 5,000 coins went at once and invested his money and earned another 5,000. In the same way, the servant who had received 2,000 coins earned another 2,000. But the servant who had received 1,000 coins went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants came back and settled accounts with them. The servant who had received 5,000 coins came in and handed over the other 5,000. You gave me 5,000 coins, sir, he said. Look, here are another 5,000 that I have earned. Well done, you good and faithful servant, said his master. You have been faithful in managing small amounts, so I will put you in charge of large amounts. Come on in and share my happiness. Then the servant who had been given 2,000 coins came in and said, You gave me 2,000 coins, sir. Look, here are another 2,000 that I have earned. Well done, you good and faithful servant, said his master. You have been faithful in managing small amounts, so I will put you in charge of large amounts. Come on in and share my happiness. Then the servant who had received 1,000 coins came in and said, Sir, I know you are a hard man. You reap harvests where you did not plant, and you gather crops where you did not scatter seed. I was afraid, so I went off and hid your money in the ground. Look, here is what belongs to you. You bad and lazy servant, his master said. You knew, did you, that I reap harvests where I did not plant, and gather crops where I did not scatter seed? Well then, you should have deposited my money in the bank, and I would have received it all back with interest when I returned. Now take the money away from him and give it to the one who has 10,000 coins. For to every person who has something, even more will be given, and he will have more than enough. But the person who has nothing, even the little that he has, will be taken away from him. As for this useless servant, throw him outside in the darkness. There he will cry and gnash his teeth.
Thank you, David. So, expectations, risks, and faithfulness. We'd heard last week about the 10 bridesmaids, 5 of whom were ready and 5 were not, for when the bridegroom came home. Some were to be found sleeping and without oil in their lamps. This passage follows on from that. Matthew says that we have to be ready, and being ready is his theme through this part of his gospel. Ready for the return of Christ, which the early church did expect imminently. Paul did the same, and that's reflected in his letters, and particularly in the letter to the Thessalonians, which is also part of the lectionary readings today. Themes of preparedness, readiness, and faithfulness are central to Paul and to Matthew's messages at this time. We live in a very different world from them, and no longer do we expect the return of Christ imminently. Our interpretation of this belief, the second coming, is reflected in the church's liturgy. But how and when will this happen? Ken Taylor, in his reflection on this passage, says, "Often it seems that God had gone away and left us to get on with it, almost as if he doesn't care, but his non-interference is necessary for our liberty. And he is only hidden because we don't know how or where to look. Although there are no signs, no proofs, no voices, he is closer than breathing, nearer than hands or feet." So this story is about an absent landowner. He goes away, having entrusted 3 of his servants with large sums of money, and they were large sums according to how much a talent was worth. What expectations did he have of them? Did he think that they would take risks with it? Could he be sure of their faithfulness in their work? The interpretation of the parable varied a bit over the years, because in medieval times, talent came to mean a gift, a personal gift, or an attribute. So the meaning of that word did change the slant of the parable, and the reflection was on how we used our gifts and attributes, not particularly about how we used our money. But using our gifts and attributes more enables us to develop our potential, as well as showing God at work and his presence in our lives and ministry. Hidden and unused, the gift withered and was of no use to the possessor, nor to any help to anyone else. And certainly God had been left out of life and living. The talent was actually a sum of money. So his servants needed to be accountable, because, as I've already said, it was quite a large sum of money. They were in charge when their master had gone away. And the parable highlights attitudes to money. Should risks be taken in investments? Should we play it safe and keep hold of it? Or should we bury it as buried treasure? Should investments be safe always? Of recent times, we have seen extremely risky behaviour in the financial world, almost resulting in bringing down the economic system of the Western world. Is the suggestion there that risks must be taken to do God's work? The money was distributed according to the servant's ability, the story says. No matter what our abilities are, God has expectations of our use of them to realize potential and benefit others. The third servant's expectations were negative. Or was he making excuses for not doing anything with it? He took no risks, nor was he faithful to his boss. He was lazy and made excuses. But there was a reversion of this situation interpreted, and that was that the third servant was actually Jesus, and he was keeping the kingdom of God safe as buried treasure, refusing to conform to the greed of the world. Keeping it safe to be discovered with joy and gladness by those who find Jesus. So what do you and I find in this story for today? Expectations of our accountability, accountable to God, using our abilities, gifts and money in his service and for others, accountable to each other that we may serve each other using our God-given talents and money. Risks are also part of our faith. Listening to God's following, facing challenges and changes through our courses, following a vision like Paul's Man of Macedonia, which appealed to him to come over to Macedonia, which he did. Faithfulness takes us into a new dimension. Be ready. Children of the light, living in the light, engaging in active service wherever the need arises. The reward, more service in God's kingdom and experience his love towards us. We are in strange times. We ask questions about the many turmoils in our world. Why on earth have we got a pandemic which seems to be going on and on? We see attitudes of many public figures not very nice to each other. The vulnerable are being still left at the bottom of the heap, still in need. And we are slowly destroying our planet unless we reverse what we are doing. What difference does our faith make to our lives and the influence we exert around us? Does our faith grow and change or remain buried? Recently, I was reading a copy of Reform magazine. That is the magazine that the United Reformed Church publishes every month. And I came across an interview with the Reverend John Bradbury, who is now the URC General Secretary. And these were phrases I picked out of the interview that I thought reflected this passage. Changing to stay faithful. He felt that we cannot be faithful to our journey, to our God, without changing. Evangelism is our ability to talk about God, and we need to tell the story of Jesus. We need to have conversations with ourselves and learn to have them with those who have no idea about God. At my age, I was brought up with the idea of God, but younger people often know little or nothing about God, about Jesus, or indeed about religion as a whole. We need to shape the new normal, he said, not it us. Now is the time we can decide what really matters to us, not just what we've missed. The church has to call out systems and structures of oppression, and we have to be in the thick of it as Christ's body. He goes on, my hope is that we remain faithful, not fearful. The kingdom is something rather more radical and more inclusive than the church. So, our expectations, risks, and faithfulness a mark of God's people? I rather think that they are.